I'm going to show you how I made this full-sized maple tree, 75 feet tall. But the methods used can be used to make anything from little bushes all the way up to big trees like this. I especially like that when you get really close to this, you can see the actual leaves. And just to give you an example, or a few examples of how you can use this to make bushes and other smaller things, here are some pictures from my layout. Of course, what makes this all possible are the actual leaves that are available from Noke as well as several other manufacturers now. These are some leaves that I got several years ago when they first came out, so I had a lot of choices of green to use. I'll be using two different greens for the tree you saw, a middle green and a slightly lighter green for sort of underneath. Of course, the leaves need something to attach to, and for that we're going to be using SuperTree branches. SuperTree is a product of Scenic Express. SuperTrees are sold online. This is from their webpage. And they also are sold at a lot of the train shows when we still had train shows, and hopefully we'll have train shows again. The other thing that we need to do is we need to have something to attach the branches to, and for that we're going to be using an armature made out of sagebrush. Now, I was very lucky because I was in the Southwest and I packed myself a box of sagebrush and mailed it to me. You can pretty much pick it off on the side of the road in a lot of places. If you can't get out that way, you can make friends with model railroaders in the Southwest and have them send you some. Or you can buy them from Scenic Express. The ones that Scenic Express has aren't particularly inexpensive, but they're quite awesome. And yes, there is a special glue. I found Hobbytack quite a few years back, and I was very interested because it specifically said that it was for trees. I found it to work pretty well with the ground foam and those kinds of options, but I found it works really great with the leaves. And you can see on the back that it tells you that when you basically put it on and you let it dry until it's clear and tacky. And I usually wait overnight. The final material that we use is matte medium, or Mod Podge, as you get it from Michaels. It's a real thick, matte, acrylic thing that dries with no shine, and it helps to protect the SuperTree branches, because the SuperTree branches, when they're right out of the package, you can crumble them in your hand. But once they've been soaked in Mod Podge, they're pretty hardy. But before we seal the SuperTree materials, we have to check them out, because sometimes there are holes where the foliage pops out of that we need to get rid of before we seal them into the final branches. Now that the branches are all clean and prepared, it's time to dip them in Mod Podge. And I use a dilute formula. I take an empty container and I put in Mod Podge, thick Mod Podge to about there. And then I fill up the rest with water and add a little bit of detergent and shake it up and shake it up and shake it up. And I label it so that I know that that's the dilute stuff, because regular Mod Podge is pretty thick. And then I pour it into a bowl. I've strung a string across my basement sink, and on the string I have put a whole bunch of wood clothespins, and I hang stuff up there. Sometimes it's trees, sometimes it's paintbrushes. So each of the branches of the SuperTrees need to be soaked for a little bit, a few seconds, 10 seconds. And then they need to be hung up to dry. And if they're crooked, you can hang a weight on the end and they'll dry straight. After the matte medium dries on the branches, then I spray paint them with a color exactly the same as the trunk color on the tree that I'm using. Now that the branches are ready, it's time to pick out a trunk and get started making our tree. We do have to prepare the trunk so it will sit evenly on the ground. Right now it has a broken off end from the field, so I'm going to try to make it pretty tall because I need a tall one for where I'm going to use this. I've got some 1.5 by 18 brads that I'm going to use for the thing to stick the tree in with. I'm going to put it inside like that. First we'll cut off the head. Then we'll match up a drill to the size of the nail. Then with the last energy left in my drill, we'll drill a hole in the bottom of the trunk that the brad can go into. A quick check to make sure it works and fits in there, and then we'll add a little super glue and slide it in permanently. So I use hot glue to attach the branches to the armature, and just for fun I thought the very first one I should put way too much hot glue on so that I could show you that even with too much hot glue it's still okay. But one of the things that you'll note is that I do use the hot tip of the hot glue gun to break the string before I put it up on there. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not. And I was picking a particularly big joint, so I knew I could get away with a bit of extra hot glue in this case, but I do spread it out later. Next branch I do a little better, but I do have to get rid of the blob on the end of the glue gun. And again, I'm also picking another big joint spot to put it in, and I'll be able to use the extra glue in the joint and it will help hold it. And you do have to hold it sometimes for like a minute or so until the glue sets up. So on the next branch, I got a little better with the glue gun. I've got a little less hanging out there, and I'm able to break the threads before it goes away by using the hot tip. In all cases, when I attach a new branch, I'm trying to extend a branch junction or make a new junction in a branch so that it looks natural when it's all done. You will be able to see the branches through the leaves when you're done. So making it look natural is really good. I'm still attaching relatively large branches to make it a main part of the tree. And I'm getting a little better with my hot glue. Extending an existing branch with a bit of SuperTree. You can see the branch line up in the foliage. the dreaded hot glue strings. But you can break them. You just use the hot metal tip to break them. Sometimes meshing the SuperTree material together helps hold it in place. And sometimes you have to do a little surgery on the branches, either to keep them from being too pointy on the end or to just change the structure. Again, taking advantage of a natural branch split to create our new branch. Taking advantage of the still hot glue, I'm sticking another branch into the joint. And now some smaller branches to fill in around the edges. Still a few big branches to fill out the other side of the tree. And sometimes you have to change the armature itself to make your branches fit better. And at the very bottom of the tree, some new branches just starting out. A nice way to distract from a curved SuperTree branch is to add a junction and another branch. I am generally removing the hold time from the video, so you don't have to watch me holding these in place until the hot glue cools. And you can use the SuperTree material itself to hold itself up. It links up together. And sometimes fingers are just too big to fit in there and you need to use tweezers. Remember that the outside edge is going to be covered with leaves, so you want to try to cover up most of the open spaces with outside edge, so you can have leaves on the outside of most of the tree. I'm almost done, so I want to check for any strings, any hot melt glue strings, and there you can see them pretty clearly with a black background. Once you find them, you can grab them with the tweezers and pull them right out. I say that like it's easy. A final check of the whole tree, and it's time to start putting on some glue to hold the leaves. As I mentioned, we're going to be using hobby tack to attach the leaves. It's a thick, gooey, very sticky white substance that comes with a brush that you can use to paint it on the trees. And you really want to get it on every little protruding part of the tree, because everywhere you touch with the glue is going to be connected to leaves. So you really want to get every little tip with glue on it so you get leaves in every place you can. By using hobby tack and only on the outside of the leaves, it keeps you from having leaves stuck to the branches or stuck to the trunk inside. That often happens when you're using a matte medium spray or something like that to hold the leaves on. The hobby tack really does make the leaves look like they are in a tree. Sometimes you'll leave a big glob in a spot and you can use the brush to redistribute it a little bit, but even if you leave a blob there, all you're going to end up with is a blob of leaves, so it's not necessarily horrible. This can be a bit tedious, so I'm going to speed it up a bit. Spreading the glue took several hours, 3 I think, so you're lucky to be able to see it in only about 4 minutes. It's important to try to get the glue into all the cracks and crevices between the bundles of tree branches that you've got in there. Because you really want to have leaves everywhere that you can have leaves, and that's pretty much on the outside of all of the SuperTree's branches. So try your hardest to get the brush into the middle of the tree as well. I went to lunch, so some of the top part of the tree was able to dry a little bit, so it got a little clearer. There's still white pretty much everywhere, but I've still got to finish the bottom here, so here we go. While it's still wet, you can use the glue to help hold the branches up to each other, sort of fit them back in. The glue helps hold them in place. Time for leaves. As I mentioned, I'm using two different colors of leaf material, and I'm pouring the leaf material into some cinnamon jars that I have saved from when they emptied, because they have little holes in the top that are just about the right size for sprinkling leaves. So this is the medium green that I'm using for the main part of the tree, and I'll also be putting some lighter green in the other shaker for underneath and inside the tree for where the lighter leaves might be. You'll note that I've added wax paper underneath the tree and underneath the jars. That's so I can save what's left when I'm done and put it back in the jar again. We'll be using one color at a time. Time to sprinkle leaves. Basically, you're just shaking it like you're shaking salt over a big meal. And you want to get a lot in there everywhere. Wherever the leaves touch the glue, they stick. And if they don't, they fall through the tray and end up on the wax paper. Of course, you can't get to everywhere from the top, so you need to pick it up and turn it around and sprinkle leaves in from every angle because you really want to get every bit covered. And when you were putting the glue on, you wanted to make sure you got glue into some of the interior spaces so you can grab some leaves there too. Well, we're done with the medium green, so it's time for us to collect up all the leftovers and put them back in the jar. Now for the lighter green color. I'm looking to use this in sort of the in-between the darker color. So in between the bunches up at the top and down at the bottom, you want to have some light color on the bottom with the darker color on top. Basically sort of sneaking it in around the middle green. You'll notice that as some of the branches get heavier with leaves, they start to hang down a little bit and drag a little. When you finish up putting the leaves on, you can set it up and push the branches back into place and get the glue to sort of hold to each other as well. In some cases, you'll need to bend the branches around, but it's totally doable. And then I highly recommend that you spray the whole tree with some inexpensive hairspray at the end to cover it all with a little bit of lacquer. It gives the leaves a little bit of extra hold. So we're almost done putting the light colored leaves on here, and then I'll show you the whole tree. So here's the finished tree. You can see the different shades of green. You can see through the leaves to the background. You can see the edges being pushed out and the little branches with leaves on them. Looks quite real. And here's the tree in its new home in the wilderness part of my layout, soon to get another layer of scenic. Thanks for watching.